Welcome back to the penultimate part of my Scottish journey. This time we will be travelling south through the Hebrides, starting with the islands of Harris and Lewis. Returning south from where we left off at Durness, we leave the Scottish mainland from the ferry terminal at Ullapool and make the 2.5-hour crossing to Stornoway on Lewis. Lewis is the largest of the Outer Hebrides islands. Most of its northern parts are flat, barren peat moorland, with all the interest around the coastline. Callanish, seen here in evening light, is the most popular, attracting tourists from all around the world. Perhaps second to Callanish is Duncarloway, the best preserved Pictish broch in the Hebrides. Built in the 1st century AD, the existing walls are 9 metres high, and you can still climb the circular staircase which was built inside its walls. From Callanish, the road continues south, following the indented coastline of Loch Rogue to the island of Great Bernera, now joined to the mainland by this road bridge. The bridge was constructed in 1953 after islanders threatened to dynamite a causeway out of the hillside opposite. This was the first pre-stressed concrete bridge built in Europe. Looking back across the narrow channel to Lewis from some of the many standing stones in the area. There are a number of settlements on Great Bernera where the main employment is lobster fishing. This shot taken at Sursabost sums up one of the many facets of island life where new and old still coexist. In some places the foundations as many as 4 dwellings can be seen. Boats and cars are no different. With nowhere to dispose of them economically, they simply rot, creating some interesting images such as this desirable 2-bath property. Returning back to Lewis, the road continues to circle Loch Rogue to the sheltered harbour at Meerveig. From Meerveig, a circular detour on a narrow single-track road takes us to Reef and Valtos. This is the mile-long beach at Reef. Back at Meerveig, and the road continues through the narrow, steep-sided Glen Valtos to Timsbury, and another cluster of villages around the beautiful Uig Bay. Another shot across Uig Bay to the rugged hills of South Lewis. In 1831, on the beach at Uig, the famous Lewis chessmen were discovered. 79 pieces in total were found in a box uncovered in a storm. Most of the 4 sets were carved out of walrus ivory, the main pieces standing about 4 inches high. 82 of them eventually ended up in the British Museum in London, whilst 11 are at the National Museum of Scotland. 5 of the pieces were missing when discovered, but 1 subsequently turned up in Edinburgh and was sold at Sotheby's for £735,000. A short distance from the previous shot, this is the site of an old fish farm, and also the infant Avon Gerag or Red River Distillery. This was taken in 2009. The first casks were laid down here the previous year and will become available would become available in 2018. Its concept was that all the constituents were sourced locally. We were told to knock on the door and ask for Mark, and I still have some of the product he gave us in old medicine bottles. The whisky is now being sold online for nearly £100 a bottle. Retracing our steps back to Stornoway, where the A859 leads south to my favourite of all the islands, Harris. There is no bridge or border to cross between the two, they simply merge into one another. The moorland scenery around this modern church is typical of the scenery on the first part of your journey south. Shortly after passing through the village of Ballallan, the B8060 leaves the main road and follows the southern shores of Loch Erisort, seen here, and into the Park district of Lewis. Another shot along the long winding road along Loch Erisort. The road finally reaches the village of Marvig in Crowmore. Marvig, seen here, the landscape in the background is typical of this area, a series of bays and inlets. North of Crowmore lies the tiny tidal island of St Columba, once an important centre of religion, but now just home to the sheep that are driven out across this tidal causeway by local crofters. Also at Crowmore is this freshwater loch are the ruins of Dun Crowmore, an Iron Age galleried broch. From the road end at Crowmore, it's possible to make a circular walk around the coast, where you can look out across the myriad of tiny islands towards the Minch and beyond to the mainland. Walking here is quite rough, with a number of tidal inlets to cross and the added complication of watching for the rising tides. Leaving Crowmore behind, the road continues south, eventually regaining the B8060 at Gravier on Loch Odern. The road culminates at the village of Lemrue on Loch Shell, where the crofters still maintain that old mixture of new and old. This is the natural harbour at Lemrue. Traditional farming methods still remain in some areas of Lewis, with hay still being dried on tripods as seen here. However, lazy beds like these are a thing of the past. This was a traditional method used all over the islands, where seaweed was laid out in strips and used to be used as a fertiliser. Gradually over the years, this built up into these fertile beds. And seaweed is not a thing that was or is in short supply, as seen here around the corner at Loch Onsay. Another view of Loch Onsay, this time looking out into the Minch and the Shint Islands. This is as far as the road goes. The distance due west between here and the next nearest road is 17 kilometres, as the crow flies. And further still down to Renegedale, the next settlement south. Between the two is nothing but a pathless wilderness of boggy moors and craggy mountains. So once again we have to retrace our steps back along Loch Erisort and onto the A859 again, which continues south to join Loch Seaforth, as seen here. The hills across the loch are those I mentioned earlier, the 17-kilometre wilderness. The road south now enters Harris proper, passing on the right another cluster of high hills, which include Clisham, the highest point on Harris. Clisham is seen here from its east ridge, with a cloud rolling in soon to obscure everything. This is the first of 3 more views of Clisham, this time taken from near Ardrishaig, all of them taken on different years. The tower visible on the shoreline at Bunavona Ardra is all that remains of an old whaling station founded by a Norwegian family in 1904, purchased by the Lever brothers in 1922. 3 whaling ships worked out of here until 1929. The station opened again briefly in the 50s, but is now a scheduled monument. The main industry now from here, other than crofting, is in fish farming. These supply boats are seen under storm lighting. After taking this shot and turning round, these three were waiting in the wind for their portrait to be taken and wouldn't move until I had. From Bonavona Adra, the narrow B887 twists and turns its way along the coast for 13 miles to Hishnish, passing on the way a number of steep-sided valleys. This is Glen Meerveig with the vertical nose of Sronskust. An estate track provides a mountain biking route into the North Harris Wilderness. Further along the road is Avonshui Castle, the road passing through its twin gatehouses. Approximately £38,000 will rent its 12 suites for a week. From Avonshui, another estate track runs through the steep-sided valley deep into the heart of North Harris. Past this narrow loch, the path can be seen on the right and leads into Glen Ullerdale and the steep cliffs of Sron Ullerdale, giving climbers the UK's greatest overhanging cliff. I'm sorry my photos of this remain unscanned as yet. Back on the road and its final end at the crofting community around Hishnish, seen here from the road above. From Hishnish, another fine coastal path takes you along the Kyle of Scarp into Glen Craverdale. This shot looks out from the cliff tops to Scarp. Now uninhabited, the old village can clearly be seen. Its last full-time resident left in 1971, although some houses remain as holiday homes. The island is famous for a rocket mail experiment by a German inventor, Gerhard Zucker, who failed twice in 1934 to fire a rocket across the Sound filled with the mail. The track climbs up the hillside over a small col to reach Loch Clearveig and lowly Craverdale Lodge. Past the lodge, the coast is regained and a choice either up Glen Craverdale, seen in the background, or back round the coast to Hishnish, passing on the way this beautiful beach. Once again, I'm backtracking down the one-way road to rejoin the 8859 to Tarbert. We pass Ardrishaig on the way from where this sunset shot was taken. Tarbert is the main town and the Calmac ferry terminal for Harris. This is the luxury cruise ship, the Hebridean Princess, with the white building behind the stern of the ship, the Hotel Hebrides and the main square. This quaint and unloved building in the town square is the Tarbert Builders Merchant, seen here in 2006 when it was a favourite subject for photographers. Now, some 10 years later, it is sadly permanently closed and painted this horrible yellow colour. Harris, however, is famous for another thing, and that's Harris Tweed. Shot taken inside the building. My wife is now the owner of a jacket made out of the blue tartan, third in from the right in the middle row. A new addition to Tarbert is the Isle of Harris Distillery, which opened its doors in 2015, with its first distilling in the following year. Also produced here is the Isle of Harris Gin, which is on sale now and with its distinctive spiral bottles already on the shelves of many restaurants in the Highlands and Islands. From Tarbert, another twisting road heads east along the shore of East Loch Tarbert. After a couple of kilometres, it crosses the outflow of Loch Laxadale, from where this track heads off into the hills. The Calmac ferry leaving Tarbert can clearly be seen in the background. The track heads over to the Kynie community at Rennigadale, a one-way trip of 6.5 kilometres. This is known as the post path, as the local postman would make the round trip 3 times a week. The track is one of the most spectacular I have ever walked. Renigerdale was the last place in the UK to be connected by road, and the path, which climbs here to around 1,000 foot, was the only way in and out for its inhabitants. The cairn in this picture marks the summit of the pass. A short walk south along the ridge from the cairn leads to the summit of Ben Tarswyn. The white dots in the middle distance are at Renigerdale. Returning back to the Bealach, another short walk in the other direction leads to the summit of Trollamall. This shot was taken from its slopes looking across Glen Laxerdale to the hills of North Harris. Once again, Clisham is the cone on the right in the centre. Back to the post path, the small cairn to the right of my wife marks the point where the path splits. Left carries on to Renigerdale and right down to the abandoned village of Mollinginish. This is the gateway to Mollinginish, with Renigerdale again seen in the centre, the white buildings. Dropping down through the village of Mollinginish, the remains of at least 9 dwellings of various sizes can be traced, including for a while a school. Most likely would have been the building on the left. The last inhabitant left here in 1964 due to old age. A sad relic of a traditional crofter stove still in situ. One of the buildings has now been fully restored and is a holiday home for a solicitor from Stornoway. All mod cons are now provided, electricity courtesy of the solar panel along the fence. From Mollinginish, this decidedly treacherous path contours along Loch Trollamarig to rejoin the post path at the head of the loch in the distance. The route of the path can be traced climbing steeply up on the right-hand side. Another shot of the path taken at the head of Trollamarig. Returning back over the post path to Urga, the tarmac road continues along the coast to the old ferry terminal for Scalpay, now redundant as the road bridge was opened in 1997. The bridge was 10 years in construction and was opened by Tony Blair just 2 days after our first visit to Scalpay. This is the North Harbour, around which most of the population is clustered. A fine 7-mile walk around the island incorporates its highest point at Ben Skorovic, the uninhabited east coast, and this Eileen Glass Lighthouse. Eileen Glass was the first lighthouse to be built in the Outer Hebrides and went into service in 1789. The original tower, now a national monument, can be seen here between the tower and the foghorn. The new tower, erected in 1824, is 30 metres high and has been fully automated since 1978. In 2004, the owners of the outbuildings were convicted of running a scam charity to finance the mortgage on the buildings and ended up serving a 2-year prison sentence. The bothy is actually a visitor information centre, but at a pinch could be used in an emergency. Leaving the lighthouse behind and heading inland, the circular walk heads across Wild Moorland, past many tiny lochans. Eventually reaching the summit of Ben Skorovic. This shot is taken looking back towards the Park District of Lewis from its summit cairn. Another shot of the typically indented coast of Scalpay, with Tarbert on Harris in the middle distance. Returning to Tarbert, the A859 crosses the isthmus into South Harris, where after 2 miles a choice has to be made, tackling the island either clockwise or anti-clockwise. Either way has its good point, but for the purpose of this talk we'll leave the main road here and head down the east coast. The landscape of South Harris East Coast is incredible, more like a lunar landscape than a Hebridean island. The road from here is known as the Golden Road because of the high cost of its construction. This area is also known as the Bays for obvious reasons. This shot was taken at Gross Bay. One way to travel this road is by bike, and this is how we solved the problem of our small dog, which could always keep up with us walking anywhere, but cycling was another thing. Continuing south along the Golden Road, this is the old post office at Stockinish. Open on our first visit but closed in 2009, although we understand it has since been reopened. Looking out from Flodder Bay across the Minch to the hills of the mainland. Yet another typical shot of the bays along the Golden Road, this time near Ardveigh. The Golden Road ends at the village and tiny port of Rodell. This is St Clement's Church, the grandest medieval building in the Western Isles, and was built in about 1520. It has appeared in quite a few films and documentaries. Glenrodal, with Runnerval in the background. The White House, clearly seen here, was home to us for a week in the 1990s. From where I made evening climbs up the east ridge of Runnerval to the highest point on South Harris. This shot was taken looking south from its summit along the Uists. Another short walk from Rodell takes us around Loch Borrisdale, seen here, to Wrenish Point, the most southerly point on Harris. From Rodell, the A869 starts again and heads towards Leverborough and the Calmac ferry terminal to North Uist. However, we've not yet finished our circuit of Harris, so we'll have to return here later. Continuing clockwise around Harris, we come to the crofting community of Northton. If you're contemplating self-catering on Harris, remember this place. The food sold here is unbelievable. Just an honesty box, with every day a changing menu. The fish pie is to die for. Also on offer, cakes, bread and soup. We never went anywhere else. Looking out over the salt marsh at Northton to Chaparval. Another view across the Macaire to Chaparval. From part of the Hebridean Way, a long-distance path which starts in Stornoway and finishes on Vattersay, and travels 156 miles through 10 islands. Another fog bow, this time on Scarrister Beach, with the slopes of Chaparval just peeping in on the left. Behind the beach is the historic Scarrister House, a boutique restaurant with rooms, the oldest of a number of really good eating places springing up on Harris. Next beach along the coast is at Bove. The next 3 photographs were taken here, some 2 minutes walk from last year's holiday cottage. Further north, this is MacLeod Stone, a 2.5 metre high prehistoric standing stone situated on Aird Nissabost, overlooking the island of Tarrantay. A view north taken from near the MacLeod Stone across to Luscantire and the hills of North Harris. Two shots now taken in evening light at Sealboss Beach. The first looking north towards Luskentire, and this one from the same spot looking eastward. Most days on the Outer Hebrides the wind blows from some direction or other, but mostly from the west, as seen here across Luskentire beach. The driven sand making interesting shapes and patterns on the ground. And finally, the last two pictures were taken at Treig Rosamall at Luskentire. This one looks north, and from the same spot one looking south. Despite its recent popularity with club photographers, some days you won't even see a soul. Okay, that's the end of my tour of Harris and Lewis. Next and last of the series, we will visit Uists, Benbecula, Eriskay and more. Bye for now.